Got this little Honda water pump I bought, I don't know what's been, 10 years ago, maybe longer than that now. And we used it for pumping water for the garden. We have a little pond up over the hill, and in the summertime when it gets dry, most of the water around here is surface water. The creek dried up and stuff like that, and we didn't have any water here in cisterns or anything at the time. And we had a little pond up over the hill there that we would stick this into and use it to pump water down for the garden. It's a WX10, and of course a 4-stroke motor Honda water pump. It has a 1-inch inlet, and it's got a corrugated hose that goes down. I think it's 10 or 12 feet long, with a big screen on the end of it, like for a regular trash pump. And it's got a 1-inch outlet here, and it had this little kit here to put on there to neck it down to a garden hose. We used that for a couple years, and it worked really good. And then it started getting to where it wouldn't stay running, and it would run poorly, hard to get it started. It's just typical small engine like you'd have on a weed whacker or anything else, and it's got a little bulb right here that you push to suck fuel out to prime the fuel pump in the carburetor. This is the carburetor here. We got a new bulb to put on there, thinking that might have been cracked and it was leaking a little bit. So anyway, we got a new bulb on there, and that really didn't fix the problem. And I put a new spark plug in it, and it's hard to find a spark plug for this little engine. Napa didn't have one, and the hardware store didn't have one. We had to actually go to the dealer who sold the pump and buy one from him, and of course it was kind of spendy for a little spark plug. But on air-cooled motors, 90% of the time, if you're having trouble with the engine starting or running improperly or something, it's the spark plug. The spark plugs really get hot, and they go through a lot of cycles, and they wear out pretty fast. Or they'd still work, but they don't work right. And if you don't change them out once in a while, once the spark plug, even though it's still working, it's not working right, the resistance in it changes, and it can cause the ignition system to fail. Old points and condenser style, it'll burn up the coil, and on the newer ones, electronic ignitions, it still burns up the coil in the electronic ignition. Well, anyway, I brought this in the shop here and started taking it apart to try to figure out what was wrong. And when I was pumping it, I was finally I'd get it to run for a little while. You'd pump it and get it to run, and then it'd quit, and then you'd get it to run. And so I got to pumping it. I was thinking there was an air leak in it someplace, and I pumped it hard, and I could see a little bit of fuel coming out right here on this gasket right here. So I decided that, I'd pull that carburetor off and see if I could fix that gasket. Turned out that wasn't the problem. It's just got a little diaphragm in there, of course, and the diaphragm had a little crack in it. It was hard anyway. People fight these. I've done it. Lawnmowers and things like that. You fight them, getting them started and getting them running right. Usually, a lot of times the problem is the diaphragm in the carburetor. It gets hard and it doesn't work quite right anymore. But eventually they will crack, and then then it won't work hardly at all. So that was what was wrong with this one. The diaphragm was bad in it. So I was looking for a kit for it, and I got to pulling the carburetor apart to see about putting a kit in it. And there's so much corrosion inside of it that it was really not feasible to put a kit in it. I could buy a kit for anywhere from $4 or $5 to $15 or $20 depending on the vendor, and it comes with the new diaphragm and gaskets and stuff, and that would have been fine. But the screw that holds in the little spring for the metering jet is so corroded in there that you can't get it out, and there's corrosion inside of there. That's one of the problems with the new fuels with the alcohol in it and stuff. It just eats those carburetors up. I've found you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you leave fuel in it, the fuel evaporates in there and corrodes it and makes a hell of a problem. And if you drain all the fuel out of it and run it dry, then the residual that's left in there still causes it to corrode and causes a problem. I could have got a kit for it for between $4 and $12, and fixed it. A carburetor for one of these through one of the Honda dealers, anywhere from $55 to $85 to over $100 depending on what vendor you go through. You can buy an aftermarket carburetor, a Chinese carburetor, and you can get one from China. That's what I got here for $5, $6, $8 with free shipping. I got this one through a vendor in California for $14 with free shipping. So they're anywhere from $5 or $6 up to $30 or so depending on what vendor you go through. So we'll take that carburetor off from there and put the new one on and see if we can't get this thing running. Two bolts here that hold this cover on for the air filter. Here's the carburetor. There's a vent that comes out of the rocker box cover here that so the gases and stuff coming out of the crankcase can go into the carburetor and burn. Two nuts on there, and the studs go into a plastic spacer off of the engine to help keep it cool, the carburetor from getting too hot. And then here's this is the throttle control here, and it's just got a little arm on there with end of it pinched just a little bit, flattened out. It fits in that little screw head. That's not really a screw head. That's just a bearing surface for the attachment there. So that's what hooks the carburetor on. That's the throttle control. Well, here's a new carburetor, almost identical to the old one, except it has this little guide on here for it. And that's held on by a couple screws that hold this throttle body in there. That's you see in there, that's the throttle control right there. Instead of a butterfly, it's just got a plastic round piece in there with a hole in the center of it. You can adjust the throttle by opening and closing it like that. So that just slides in that top of that this body of the housing of that. So that's held on with those screws. So I can take those screws off and take this little piece here off, and then it'll be identical to that. This is the primer line here. Just comes off that hose, and then the fuel line off of there. That carburetor just slide right off of there. And that's it right there. That's the old carburetor. Here's the new one. Now, one of the reasons I picked this kit over the other ones in the that were on eBay is that it came with a new gasket. Is with a little bit of a difference here, and I'm not gonna fool with it. See, this carburetor that came on here has the fuel inlet port at an angle, and then this one has it coming straight down, and it's not worth fooling with that. I just put that. Probably should get new fuel lines. These are a little bit hard. Okay, that's on there. Now we'll put this throttle rod back in there. That's hooked up. And this, I'm going to put the vent hose back on. That's back on there. Hopefully, go ahead and alright, there's getting fuel. This is the choke, and it's pretty easy. It's just a plastic flat plastic piece that goes over to choke off the carburetor. On-off switch. A little bit of throttle. There we go. Alright, now we'll take that up and hook the hose up to it. You can't run it, or you're not supposed to run it any length of time without the pump hooked up. It'll burn the pump up, but so anyway, that starts better than it did before. Runs fine. We'll take it up and hook it up. Now this is the original carburetor. It's a Walbro carburetor. Okay, now this section is the primer pump. It primes fuel. And then this is where the diaphragm goes for the fuel pump. And it goes right in there. This is the metering needle valve here. You can see how corroded that is in there. I can force this to move up and down, but just barely. But I tried to get that screw out of there. I could get it out of there, grind it out or something, but it's considering how corroded that is, it's not worth fooling with. And the rest of the carburetor looks pretty good. It could be polished up and probably reused, but for the difference between $7 or $8 for a kit and $15 for a new carburetor, it's not worth fooling with. Okay, I got the pump here ready to test it, and if the test works, we'll put it to work. What's going on is I've got a 10,000 gallon water tank here for our domestic water system. It's a rainwater catchment system off the roof, and we've made a cover for it to go over the top of it to help keep the dirt and the crap, vermin, mice, whatever out of it. And we just got it finished. But the tank's sat here open for 3 or 4 years with the liner in it, well, a couple years anyway. So it's got crap in it already. And we want to drain the tank to clean it out, and then we'll put the cover over it and let it fill back up. We want to keep some water available to use. So I've got this 1,500 gallon tank over here that's empty. We set it over here close by the big tank, and the idea was to take the pump and pump enough water out of the big tank to fill up that tank, and then when we get the big tank cleaned out, we can just dump the water out of the smaller tank into the big tank to have a start until it fills back up with rainwater. So that was what was going on. We tried the pump on it and we couldn't get the pump to work. So the first thing we got to do with the pump is prime it. Now that can be pretty frustrating. I can remember being in dry country and standing right beside a well, perfectly good well with a pump on it, and we couldn't pump any water because we didn't have any water to prime the pump with. But that's what it takes. So we'll prime this pump. Should do that. I've already had this started, so it should start all right. I'll go ahead and prime the engine just a little bit with gasoline. We'll see what happens. Well, I have it turned off. It helps to turn it on. Shouldn't take too long to fill that up. We might have to gas it up once before we get it finished filling up, but it's working now. Better than using a bucket brigade.